When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and it's time to get wealthy. You're going to learn exactly what you need to know and do to finally achieve the level of financial success you desire and you deserve. The fastest growing segment of new businesses is Black women. And yet, over $300 billion in VC capital was given in 2021. And yet only 2% of women received any of it, and only 1.7% of Black founders. So how do Black women get their fair share? Well, here today to share with us exactly what we need to do is someone who's made it her mission to create generational wealth for Black founders. But here are the 3 things you may not know about what it means to be a successful builder. First, know your value and your values. Build a board of advisors, and then know when to pivot. And here to share with us exactly what we need to know and do is Catherine Finney. She's the managing partner of Genius Guild, a $20 million venture fund. She's an amazing Black founder herself, and she has made it her business to help other Black founders find their path to generational wealth. She is also the author of Build the Damn Thing, and it is my pleasure to invite Catherine Finney to Get Wealthy. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Hello, Catherine. Thanks so much for joining us. You know, I shared with you I was listening to your new book, Build the Damn Thing, on audio, bursting out laughing because I felt like you were channeling all of my frustration as I was trying to go out and raise capital for an app that I wanted to build. So I would love for you to just start out. You're a serial entrepreneur. Why did you think it was important to write this book?
Yeah, I wrote Build the Damn Thing because it was the book I wish I had when I started. When I started way back in the stone ages of tech, I think my first company, I started building it in 2002. There was little to no advice for someone like me. There was little to no advice for women. There's definitely no advice for anyone who was Black, who was building a startup in that world. And I had to figure out everything myself. No one was forthcoming with any information. So everything from how to build it and scale, who to hire, how to get venture funding, even what is venture funding, right? What is venture capital? No one would willingly give me that information, and I had to learn how to do it myself. And so I wrote this book so hopefully people don't have to start at zero like me, that they're going to be able to come into building their companies with quite a bit of information and then be able to take it to the next step. So it's almost like the cheat code to building a company as someone who's not a rich white guy.
Love it. And so the framework for the way we frame success on Get Wealthy is really through a framework of mindset, strategy, and execution. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I want to start with mindset. I know in your book, one of the things I found so interesting is that you kind of named things, like you called the folks, the rich white folks entitled, and it's sort of that was just so, what do I want to say, just insightful for me, because so often you feel like, why aren't I getting ahead? And the point you make in the book really is because you're a builder. You didn't get any advantage. You are not entitled. So let's be clear on that. So I had gotten so discouraged about doing pitches. And so my first question to you is really around mindset. What is the mindset that you have to have as a Black founder out here trying to raise money for your business?
Yeah, as a builder, we have to realize that we're not going to be given the same runway, the same experience, the same help as others. And, I always like to quote my grandmother, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. And so for us coming into building and knowing that, we have to employ a little bit of different strategies. And the first thing that we have to do is really get our mind right. That's the first step of the entire book. And I talk quite a bit about getting yourself mentally prepared, kind of building that foundation so that you're able to deal with the challenges that you're going to deal with as you build. Being an entrepreneur, regardless of your race, your gender, your class, is hard. It's hard for everyone, but it's especially hard if you're not given that extra push. And I talk about the video game, where some people start on different levels depending on your identity. So if you're starting on the hardest level and you're supposed to make it to the end, you're going to need a lot of different tools. You're going to need a lot of different armor. And so as a startup founder, as an entrepreneur of color, it's first, building your personal advisory board. I think that's one of the things that's helped me the most. And what I mean by that is, for our companies, we have corporate advisory boards, or we have business advisory boards of people who give us great business advice. The personal advisory board of the people who are in the business of you personally, and want to see you succeed. And so there's a couple of different roles. As a person of color who comes from resource poor communities, I've had experiences where, if there's an article that Catherine raised $10 million in Forbes, and family members see it, and then they, call me and ask if I could, help them buy a refrigerator or whatever it may be, it can be really hard to say no. And so I have on my personal advisory board my mother, who, is a 75-year-old Black grandma who loves to say no and no one's going to question. And so she can say no for me when I can't say no to that particular family member without causing a particular challenge. I have someone on my personal advisory board who brings laughter. When you're building a company, it can be lonely, it can be hard, it can be frustrating. And so having a little of levity in your process, time where you can laugh and just release, is so important. For me, that person is actually my son. He, is 7 years old. He's hilarious. It's very hard to be mad at a portfolio company of mine that's not doing great if I have a 7-year-old, singing a rap song about people who live in the toilet. It just puts everything in perspective. And then there's other members of your personal advisory board, the person who can tell you about yourself and you hear it. Sometimes as entrepreneurs, we get so excited about what we're doing and about the business, and we don't hear the challenges with it. We can't see it because we're so committed and so into it. And so having someone on your personal advisory board that you can hear, right, that can tell you about yourself, right, and you can actually hear it, because there's a lot of people who can tell you about yourself, but you may not want to listen to them. You need the person who you listen to, whose advice you trust, and who can give you the guidance and can tell you things and you can hear it. And so I think that's very, very important for us as we build, and particularly getting ourselves mentally prepared. And then also, and this is, I think, one of the most important things, is being comfortable with failure. And that's really hard when you come from communities where your success is the success of everyone else. I often talk about how we don't get to own our failures as Black folks. Like, if I fail, it's not just Catherine Finney did bad, it's Black women did bad, it's Black women can't write, it's Black people can't be in this space, it's people from Chicago can't do it, what have you. We don't get to own our failure as our white male counterparts do. When Billy fails, it's just Billy failed. It's not all of the Billies in the world, it's not all the white men. And as a result, it can really create this space where we get really afraid to fail. But that is a part of the process of winning. You cannot win if you have not failed. And in the book, I tell the story of Beyonce because I love Beyonce. And about how when in the first version of Destiny's Child, they were on Star Search, and she was 12 years old, and they lost to a hair metal band. Like Beyonce lost to a hair metal band. And how she could have been like, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to go and just be like a regular kid. We can't even beat these like hair metal band people. But she didn't, and she continued to work. And the first song that they had as Destiny's Child was No, 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 No. And a part of it was inspired by all the no's they got as they were building their singing group. So I share that to talk about how as communities we have to get comfortable for failure, because that's on the path to success. And those are the things I think are really important, getting yourself mentally ready to be in this space.
Well, you know what, Catherine, it's interesting. One of the points that you make is that, that bias is unconscious, bias, whether it's unconscious or otherwise, is real. And so your point that you make is just about that if we need to build our own rules of funding and investing. And certainly that's where I felt like I was at a certain point. And so I started crowdfunding, to get the money. What, in terms of us really thinking about what are our avenues, and one of the other points you make is that we need to act like we're entitled already, and to overcome things. What advice can you give us about venturing out and creating that funding source so we don't get discouraged and just, kind of throw our idea to the side?
One of my favorite pieces of advice I got from a friend, her name is Cheryl Conti. She's one of the first Black woman to sell her company to a publicly traded company. And she always says, go into the room and just, pretend like you're a rich white guy. She's like, and she said, and go into the room and realize that you are the coolest person they have met that day. They have met no one else more interesting than you that day. And this is so true when you're a woman, when you're a person of color. You go into the room, they spend all day looking at the same people, and here you show up being fabulous, wearing whatever it is that we wear because you know how we do it. And you are the coolest person they met. You are the most interesting person they met. You are going to be the topic at dinner that night. And so walk into the room holding your head high as such and understanding that. And that piece of advice has served me so well, going into rooms, because it is what it is. This packaging is what it is. I cannot change being Black, nor will I ever change being Black or being a woman. It is the identity that I walk through the world. So accept it. And I accept it and I love it, right? And so I come into spaces like that, and it's so important for us to start to do that, because we cannot change ourselves, and diminishing ourselves does not serve anyone. It doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve the businesses we're trying to build. It doesn't serve our family. It definitely doesn't serve our community. So I think that's really important. As a result of that, when you walk in that way, you start to realize what types of assets we have in our community. And I talk about this in the book. The assets we have in our community have been undermined, meaning in the tech space, these things that can help your business, that comes uniquely from being a part of our communities, is often not seen as a plus. So many of us may not have friends and families that can write us $50,000 checks. As I say to people, I am the friend and family in my family. Like, I am that person. But could our families help us with PR? Could our families maybe work, on a Saturday when we need a little extra help? In my case, when I was starting the social enterprise I founded, Digital Undivided, I needed childcare help. I could not find great childcare and was frustrated and was a nervous wreck. Any of you who have ever had challenges with childcare, you know exactly what I mean. And I called my mom up. My mom was very much retired. She had been done raising her kids. And I said, I need help. And she said, okay, I'll come. And I thought she was saying she was coming for a week or two. She ended up living with us for 4 years, the first 4 years of my son's life. And when I say, I can't even calculate how much money that would have been. So yeah, she didn't write me a $50K check from my company, but it would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that level of care from someone who I knew loved dearly my son. And so I think for us, start to look at the assets our community can give us that are not necessarily money. Many of us go to large churches, asking the pastor if we can pitch our company, during the announcements. Can we put something in the church announcements? Is there some other way? Can we put our books, for those of us who are authors, can we put our books in the church's bookstore? All of these sort of things are assets we have in our community. Many of us are starting to turn to crowd equity platforms like Republic and others, where it allows you to sell equity in your companies, but to other people besides people like myself who are venture capitalists. So if we have communities that we're a part of, sororities, churches, community organizations, it can be a really effective way to raise money for our companies. And then those people become owners in our company. They have ownership. And then they also have a big sort of feather in our success. They will start to pitch you, they will start to promote you, because your success means their success as well.
You said a lot, and I think for so much of it, it really is mindset making a shift. But really, I think in your book, what you acknowledge is, girl, what is for real, right? It's for real, for real. You're not imagining things. And so when we come back, I want to go to the next part of our framework, which is strategy. And I really feel like your book really gives some very insightful, specific tips on what women need to, Black women specifically, Black founders need to do, and people of color around getting their fair share and actually getting access to funding. So when we come back, folks, it's all about strategy. So don't go anywhere. I hope you're enjoying this conversation with Catherine Finney, who is sharing with us the strategies from her book, Build the Damn Thing. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and you're watching Get Wealthy. And today we're learning how to get wealthy as entrepreneurs, getting access to capital so that we can grow our business and build generational wealth. Catherine, you gave us a lot around mindset, certainly, but now I want to talk about strategy. And I think what would be very insightful for our audience, and by the way, you need to buy, you need to get Build the Damn Thing by Catherine Finney. Let's make sure we not only listen, but we support. But you said something something that really stood out to me, and what it was your first pitch. And so, talk about strategy, and the pitch is so important if you're going to get startup capital. So I would love to share with the audience what that experience was like and what you learned from it.
Yeah, I had created this really successful blog called The Budget Fashionista. And so I was making real money. I was doing really well. And I entered into one of the early incubator programs in New York City. And it was about 45 people, 4 women and me. And I was not just the only little chocolate drop there. I was the only person who had any sort of like tan coloration to my skin. And for me, I was used to that. I grew up in Minneapolis, so I was used to being the only Black person. But what I wasn't used to was having people have no expectations of me. And that's what happened. I got up to do my pitch. It was a beauty sort of tech company for Black women. This was in 2009. Now in 2022, after success of Shea Moisture and others, we know that that's an amazing business. But in 2009, people didn't get it, right? And people meaning sort of the white male folks who had access to capital. So I got up and pitched into this group of maybe 150, 200, mostly white male investors. And it was an amazing pitch. I was actually told that. But you could see that they were desperately trying to figure out how to sort of undermine that fact. They were shocked that I could speak, which was weird because I was a correspondent at that time on the Today Show. So I was speaking like every month to millions of people. And again, as I said, I'm from Minnesota. I know how to talk, right? So I'm like, why is that surprising to you? And so I gave the speech and I knew my numbers backwards and forwards because I knew that's how they kind of get us because we don't know our numbers sometimes. And that would be one of the pieces of advice I would say to founders of color. When you go on into pitch, they're going to challenge you and they're going to challenge you harder. And so make sure you know your numbers, your customer acquisition costs, the lifetime value, the amount of possible monthly recurring revenue, all these things. Know it backwards, forwards, behind, cartwheels, all of it. Know all of it because you're going to get questioned on it. And so I was really excited. I knew my numbers, was excited to answer the questions. And the first question was not really a question, it was a statement. He said, I don't think you relate to other Black women. This was a white guy who was telling me this in front of 150, 200 Black or white investors. And he said, I don't think you can relate to other Black women because you have an accountant. And I just don't think other Black women would be able to relate to that. And I did what most, Black folks do when we're put in that situation. You do this instant mental calculation because you can't pop off because you want to pop off. That's what you want to do, right? But you cannot because everyone's looking at you. If you pop off, again, we don't get to own our failure. If you pop off, it's like, well, Black women just can't take the heat in tech. They just can't do it. You're like set up for this failure. And so, the first question I asked, because I was curious, I was like, do tell, because I was like, maybe he grew up in Harlem. I live in the South Side of Chicago. Maybe he grew up around here. I don't know. Like maybe he knows something about Black people. I don't know, even though I've been Black my entire life. And it was so dismissive. And I later went to talk to the founder of the incubator, who's a white guy who's still around. And he sat me down and he said, look, you honestly know this business. You have this active customer base. You are known in this space. But I've never known a Black woman to raise venture capital. And I don't think you will be the first. So thank you. And it was like, thank you, meaning you can go now. And it was so dismissive. But for me, it didn't really matter what they said because I had a successful business going on with the Budget Fashionista. So what he said about that was irrelevant because I saw the revenue and I had the bank account and I knew what was coming in. So your sort of racist, sexist opinion didn't trump my bank account because my bank account is what it is. But it was really disheartening, but it led me to start Digital Undivided, which is a social enterprise that I found that really works in creating a space where women win, particularly women of color win. I don't think I would have started if I hadn't gone through that experience because I'm like, here I am, someone who is successful that's built the company, and yet you dismiss me just as much as you would dismiss anybody else. And it's like there is a structural problem here. There's an institutional problem here that is really difficult to solve. And so, going through that pitch, And seeing someone like myself having to be questioned, or it's not even questioned, being discounted in that way, it spurred me to create something that directly addresses that. And as a result of that, we did Project Diane, which was the first report that really documented a lot of the inequities within venture capital and totally blew up the venture capital industry. To this day, I'm always surprised at the impact the report had. But it came out of this frustration and the gaslighting of venture capital and my white male colleagues of like, oh, it's not really that bad to receive investment. I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to document just how bad it is because I need you to see just how bad it is. And the way I know how to do that is through research. And I'm a Yale-trained epidemiologist, and so I know how to do research, and that's what we did with Project Diane. So a lot of good came out of that horrible experience. And I think as entrepreneurs, particularly entrepreneurs of color, you're going to get challenged. That's a guarantee. And you're going to get challenged probably unfairly. That's a guarantee.
Yeah, Catherine, you know what? That's why I wanted our audience to hear this experience, right? Because the reason it's so important is oftentimes, we have to keep our cool, but in so many instances, we are in a hostile environment, right? And so if not, what I love in your book is you talk about how you have to keep your cool because you don't want to ruin it for the other founder that's going to come behind you and, maybe pitch to an investor. And because you kind of lost your cool or something, you ruined it for them. But I would ask the question, because the other thing you do in your book is you really kind of explain, you explain, if you're a startup and if you're not a startup, right? And so the other aspect that I think is important, let's say you're lucky enough to get someone to invest in your business or agree to, how do you decide if you are ready for this kind of capital or not, whether or not to turn the money down?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there's a lot of people who have various thoughts about getting capital and when to. I always believe, particularly venture capital, which is a different type of capital. Venture capital is high growth capital, it's high velocity, meaning it's capital that's there to fuel rapid growth. If you're creating a company in which you're not looking for rapid growth, meaning you want to create a local bakery, and you're not looking at doing 10,000 pies a year. You only want to do the 100 pies a year, or something smaller. Venture is not going to be the best for you. And the reason why it's not is you're going to be pushed and forced to scale rapidly and create rapidly, because that's the only way that I get a return as a venture capitalist. So if you're not in a high velocity business, meaning a business that you're not growing rapidly and has the possibility to grow rapidly, don't take venture funding. And in many ways, I would say don't even take angel funding. There are other ways to access capital. There's grants, there's small business loans, there's micro lending platforms like ACON and others. There's crowd equity. There's so many different ways in which you can access capital, but don't take venture capital, right? That's really only when you have a high velocity, high growth company.
That's good. So we've covered a lot of ground, and I hope our audience is enjoying just your candor and the insight that you're giving us so that we can, if we need it, get access to this capital. So when we come back, the next part of the framework is execution. And so I want to share with our viewers what they need to do to be successful. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back.
Attention!
We're back
bigger and stronger than ever. Season 2 is reloading May 26th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
What's up?
Being a black man, we gotta stop letting this slide.
With new hosts.
Let me tell you what damn time it is.
And big celebrity surprises.
Kiss my behind. It's Oprah Winfrey.
Subscribe today at Truth Talks Live.
Give black people what they need, and we'll show them for you.
And don't miss out on all the upcoming viral moments.
Simulcasting weeknights at 8 p.m. on Roland Martin Unfiltered and Black Star Network and Truth Talks Live. I'll see you there.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and we certainly have been having a conversation about getting wealthy and getting wealthy through entrepreneurship. That is how real wealth has been built in this country, and so much of it is having access to capital, but not only monetary capital, social capital, and all the insight that Catherine Finney, who is the one of the partners in the Genius Fund and a general partner, founder of the Genius Fund and a general partner in the Greenhouse Fund. So Catherine, thanks so much for giving us just the insight around, the mindset we need to have to be successful and some of the strategies we can use to fund our businesses. But the other question I have for you, though, once a business is up and running and profitable, the way you define startup in the book is really you are starting out with an idea, you want to grow fast and you're looking for an exit. Whereas the majority of Black founders and Black businesses specifically are maybe not startup. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what do you do if you feel like, man, I have a proven concept and now I want to scale and put a tech component? How do you know when and if you should do that?
Yeah, I think it's really up to you, meaning deciding at what scale do you want to operate? Do you want to grow a business that serves a lot of people, or do you want to grow a business that serves a localized group of people? And that is a question for you to determine. And once you determine that, the type of capital that you access is going to follow. These are certain types of capital that are best for those things. So for example, a bank loan. It might be best as a bank loan if you have a single sort of brick and mortar location and you're only going to operate that and you don't want to grow or scale, and that you want to not give up any equity within your business. Bank loans are great. However, if you're developing a website that uses a lot of technology, and in order to get it off the ground, you're going to have to hire a bunch of people, and it's going to be difficult to get a loan for it, then that's where venture comes in, because venture is more patient capital, where loans, you got to pay them back each month, and if you don't, they'll come and take everything. But for me, when I invest in you, I'm investing on a 5-year horizon, meaning I'm looking that it's going to take me 5 years to get this return back. And so that's one of the ways that I think can help you sort of figure that out.
It's interesting, your own journey, Catherine. I didn't realize that you were way ahead of your time in terms of your budget fashionista and really growing that to beyond 7 figures and exiting. And so I guess that's my other question. I think so often, and you define this in the book too, exit a startup, really starting up to exit. And for many of our businesses being legacy buildings and wanting to go to the next legacy, I guess the question I want to ask is, how do you know when like if you built a business and someone were to ask you to buy it, how do you understand valuation? Like when you sold your business and exited, how did you determine what it was worth?
It's interesting because in the startup context, there's usually 4 reasons why people buy a company. It's and I call it the 4 T's. It's taxable income, meaning that you have quite a bit of revenue, and it is easier for the company to buy you rather than create and work and build a sales team and so forth to get that same level of revenue. The other one is technology, that you have some sort of technology or framework that it would be really expensive for them to like build themselves. Talent, maybe you or your team or the team that you've built is so exceptionally smart that it would be, again, it would take them a long time and a lot of money to build it. And the last but not least is traffic, or that's community. You've built this large community, or you have this large customer base that, again, is cheaper, faster for whoever's buying you to buy you rather than to spend time building it themselves. And so once you understand those, and you understand why people will buy you. In terms of when to sell, that's really, again, a question you have to ask yourself. And for me, I sold the Budget Fashionista because it was at crossroads. I had scaled it as far as I could without taking any equity-based investments, like anyone having ownership of the Budget Fashionista. So I had a choice. I could sell it to a PE firm, or I could take venture capital and really work and try to grow it. The problem with that is, like, I didn't want to be the Budget Fashionista anymore. And both of those areas would have required me to come onto the company and stay. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And so as a result, the amount that I sold my company for was a little bit less than what it would have been if I had stayed or had been an employee there. But it was my decision to sell, and I wanted to sell. And so what I got from it was the same sort of, the return I got from selling was the return that I needed. So as an entrepreneur, really think about where you're at in your life if you have an offer to sell. Look at what's going on in the market. There's people use sometimes a multiple of what they call EBITDA. It's like earnings before interest and taxes. I feel like, am I saying that? Tax. Like it's a long acronym. I might have missed one of the words in there. But they'll use a multiple of that. Sometimes they use a multiple of revenue. And it is very industry specific, because some industries have a higher multiple, meaning people will buy you for 10 times your revenue versus other industries where people might only buy you for 2 times your revenue. So there's a lot of information on that online if anyone is in the process of thinking about selling their company and need to understand valuation. I would also say this: make sure that you have good counsel, good legal counsel who has worked on a merger, acquisition, and or a purchase before. I've seen this happen to many Black entrepreneurs where they cut corners when it comes to lawyers, and they pay for it deeply later on.
You've given us, I don't know about our audience, but you've given us so much information in this episode. However, what I want folks to know is there is so much more in her book, and I would get the audio book and I would get the book, because the book is almost like a manual to navigating the shown up streets of entrepreneurship, because that's what I felt like. She was taking me back to my upbringing, but really helping us to understand that you're not crazy, right? Like,
yeah,
they do have an economic advantage, but we can bring our own advantage to the table to be successful as well. And so when we come back, it's our Analyze, Optimize, and Maximize segment. And what I want Catherine Finney to do for us is to just share with all of you what she hopes you will take away from her labor of love, her book, Build the Damn Thing. So don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back.
We begin tonight with the people who are really running the country right now. Now, Trump is often wrong and misleading about a lot of things, but especially about history. Donald Trump falling in line with President Elon Musk.
In the wake of the unsettling news that MSNBC has canceled Joy Ann Reid's primetime show, The Readout, Roland Martin and the Black Star Network would like to extend an invitation to all of the fans of Joy Ann Reid's MSNBC show to join us every night to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming on the Black Star Network for news, discussion of the issues that matter to you, and the latest updates on the twice impeached, criminally convicted felon-in-chief Donald Trump and his unprecedented assault on democracy, as well as co-president Elon Musk's takeover of the federal government. The Black Star Network stands with Joy Ann Reid and all folks who understand the power of Black voices in media. We must come together and never forget that information is power. Be sure to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered weeknights, 6 p.m. Eastern at youtube.com/Roland S. Martin or download the Black Star Network app.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and I hope you have really enjoyed this episode with Catherine Finney, author of the book, Build the Damn Thing, because quite frankly, that's how wealth is built in America. Catherine, one of the things I would love for you to do for our viewers is to give them a sense of what you hope them to learn. You hope that they learn from your book.
You know, I wrote this book for us. And what I hope they learn and readers learn is that we can build it. We have support, and that the universe is conspiring for our greatness. And I think we don't often hear that. We know there are people who are conspiring against us, but know that the greater universe, those of us who are spiritual God, wants us to be great and wants us to build and wants us to be successful. And I'm hoping that from this book that people are inspired and also get the knowledge and the confidence to do exactly that.
Excellent. Well, folks, when we come back, the 3 takeaways from today's show about how you can build your own business. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back.
What's up, y'all? Look, Fanbase is more than a platform. It's a movement to empower creators, offering a unique opportunity for everyday people to invest in Black-owned tech, infrastructure, and help shape the future of social media. Investing in technology is essential for creating long-term wealth and influence in the digital age. The Black community must not only consume tech, we must own it.
Discover how equity crowdfunding can serve as a powerful tool for funding Black businesses, allowing entrepreneurs to raise capital directly through their community through the Jobs Act.
I'm Deborah Owens, and I hope you have been getting wealthy on this segment, on this episode of Get Wealthy, because it really was all about you learning what you need to do to get your fair share and fund your business. So here are the 3 takeaways from today's show. Know your worth and think bigger. Clearly, you've got an idea and you can build that dream. Secondly, teamwork makes the dream work, and you need to make sure you're with the right folks and you have a team of advisors. And the truth is, entrepreneurship, it's hard, but it's worth it. I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach. So glad you joined us for this episode right here on the Black Star Network.